Have you ever felt super overwhelmed by the huge variety of watercolor brushes? There are different shapes and sizes, and you're wondering, what watercolor brush do you actually need? Because in this video, we're going to talk about all the different shapes of watercolor brushes and how to use them, but also how to choose the right brush for yourself. But before we start talking about all the different types of watercolor brushes, let's talk about the anatomy of a watercolor brush so you know exactly what I'm talking about later. Now, one of the important parts of a brush is the handle, as you not only hold it while you paint, but because it also gives you a lot of information about the size, brand, the series, and sometimes even the shape. The handles are usually made out of plastic or wood, which can also be coated with varnish. With some cheaply made brushes, you might run into the issue that the varnish will chip over time, which might end up falling into your painting while working on it. And this is already one of the reasons to stay away from them, personally. On top of the handle, we have the ferrule that is usually made out of metal. The ferrule can be either round or flat. At the top, we have the heel. This is where the bristles enter the ferrule. And on the bottom, we have the crimp that secures the ferrule onto the handle. Make sure you pay attention to the crimp very carefully, because sometimes there are brushes where they don't secure the both pieces together properly, so you can just detach them. Sometimes it just falls down, so keep that in mind. Lastly, we have the head of the brush and its bristles, which are divided into the tip or toe and the belly. The belly of the brush is the widest and biggest part of its bristles. The bigger the belly, the more water and pigment it can hold. One of the most important parts of the brush is the tip or toe. Here you want to look for a brush that has a super sharp tip that can make very fine and tiny lines. Brushes of poor quality usually don't have a fine tip, which makes it difficult to not only control the shape, but also to create details, making the brush less versatile as it could be. Now, you might wonder what is actually the difference between watercolor brushes and other brushes for like acrylics or oil paints. Watercolor brushes are not only shorter in their handle size compared to, for example, brushes for oil or acrylic paints, but they also have bristles that are a lot softer, as you not only want the water and paint to be gently and evenly applied in multiple layers, but because you also work on paper, which can be damaged otherwise. A watercolor brush basically acts like a sponge that soaks up water and paint while releasing it slowly onto the paper in order to create smooth washes. I also got a ton of questions about whether you can use watercolor brushes for any other paint like acrylics or oils. Now, if you use synthetic brushes, you technically can use them for acrylics, for example, but high quality synthetic brushes that are made especially for watercolors can be damaged very easily when you paint with acrylics, for example. Because acrylic paint contains different chemicals, you will have to clean your brush a lot more properly, and you might damage them by painting on rough surface, canvases, and just by simply using different techniques with the brush. If you use watercolor brushes made out of natural hair, I would stay away from acrylics altogether, as they're already pretty expensive and should be used only for watercolors. Now, the most common watercolor brush is the round brush. They are called round brushes because they have a round ferrule, the bristles have a fine point, and are usually fuller at the belly. This brush can not only hold a good amount of water and paint, but it also allows you to paint in a variety of stroke widths, from super thin to broad, and it also allows you to fill in areas with paint, making it a very versatile brush. But the round brush also comes in different sizes. It can be small and large. The small round brush is great for narrow lines and dots, as it not only holds very little water due to the short bristles, but it also has a really fine point, which is great for super small details and miniature painting. But there are also super big round brushes that are also called mop brushes. They hold a lot more water and paint, which makes them great for big washes of paint and water. The main difference to a regular round brush is that they usually have a bigger belly and not necessarily need to have a super fine tip, as the main purpose of a mop brush is to fill a large area with paint or water. Another most common watercolor brush is the flat brush. Compared to round brushes, flat brushes have a flat ferrule and flat bristles. They're not only great for straight thin lines, large broad strokes and details, but they're also great for big even washes by covering large areas with paint or water. Since the bristles are flat, you can also use watercolor techniques such as glazing. Now there are also different variations of flat brushes. For example, bright, or also called short flat brushes. A bright brush has wider and shorter bristles which can hold less water, but it gives you more control with their slightly stiffer brush strokes, allowing you to paint short chunky strokes while keeping their shape. Another version of a flat brush is the angled brush. This type of brush is made in a similar way to a regular flat brush, but their hair is aligned to create an angle. This brush is not only great for creating washes of paint, but for creating thin lines, sharp edges, and other small details. But you can also use this type of brush for fun techniques. For example, you can load up only one side of the wet brush with paint, and then allowing it to softly run into the wet area it creates next to it. With this brush, you have a little bit more control as you have with a dagger or sword brush, for example. A dagger or sword brush is similar to the angled brush, but it has longer bristles that evenly create a curve rather a sharp edge. You can also use it for creating washes, thin lines, and details while being able to hold more water and paint compared to the angled brush. And then we also have watercolor brushes that are a little bit in between. They are round but also flat. And these types of brushes are called Filbert brushes. They have a flat ferrule but a round shaped end. It's not a very common watercolor brush as it's used more in oil and acrylic painting, but you can also use it to fill in areas similar to a flat brush, create petals or other round shapes, as it is a lot more difficult to create harder edges. Another more extreme version is the cat tongue brush. Besides their similar shape to Filbert brushes and the ability to fill in areas with paint, they also have a very fine tip which allows you to paint small details. Besides all these types, you can also find brushes that are called liner, rigger, or script brushes. They're not meant for washes or filling in areas, but rather for lines and details. Compared to a regular small round brush, liner brushes have extremely long bristles, which makes it possible for them to hold a lot more water and paint. This means it gives you the ability to paint a long steady line in one go, which can require a little bit of practice as the liners can be difficult to control if you're new to this type of brush. This way you can add details, grass, or other thin lines more easily without loading up your brush with paint every 2 seconds. Last but not least, we have the fan brush. The fan brush has flattened bristles in a round shape, which purpose is to rather move the paint to create special textures or details. It can be used for dry brushing to create grass or other texture. And when the brush is wet, it creates several mini brushes, giving you even more options to create texture and details in your painting. But there are also other brushes that give you the option to create cool effects, and they're called rake brushes. Rake brushes, yeah. You can get them as a flat or as a fan brush. They basically have additional longer bristles that stand out that can create multiple thin lines while painting grass to make them look even more natural. I also found that those rake brushes can hold their detailed shape a lot better while being wet compared to the regular fan brush. And usually when you buy one of those brushes, they are protected by a coating and a plastic cap, so they won't get damaged during the shipment. So before you can use them, simply remove the plastic cap and carefully rinse off the coating with water. And then just dab it with a paper towel and it's ready to be used. And because there's so many different watercolor brushes to choose from different brands, from super cheap to super expensive, it's really important to look into the quality of each of them. So how do you identify good quality and what should you look for in watercolor brushes? So before you decide buying a brush, check the following points. To identify a good quality brush, you want to look out for the 3 main parts I mentioned earlier: the bristles, the ferrule, and the handle. Make sure that the handle and the ferrule are connected properly. Sometimes you might notice that the handle is not even correctly attached nor is straight, and the ferrule might not even hold the bristles properly. Besides losing hair, another common thing I noticed in poor quality brushes is that their bristles are not even correctly shaped. They have random hair standing out or even have uneven edges, which makes me really wonder why these brushes even exist on the market. Now, if you're just starting out, you don't need 5 million different brushes in different sizes and shapes. So I personally would start with a regular round brush with a fine tip and maybe get 2 or 3 different sizes, a small, a medium, and a large brush. Now, if you notice that it takes you a long time to spread the paint or water across like a whole page of paper because you want to paint a galaxy or something like that, you can always get a mop brush or a big flat brush and use that for that, or use other techniques that I talked about in the beginning. Now, keep in mind that the numbering can not only be different across multiple brands, but also within one single brand. So there is no real standard numbering system. So I will look into one range of brushes and pick accordingly. Also, don't worry about natural hair brushes when you're just starting out, because they're not only super expensive, but they also need a lot more care. And it's a lot easier to destroy them when you're just starting out. I ruined a lot of brushes when I started out, so please don't do this mistake. Now, watercolor brushes made out of natural hair tend to hold more water and paint because the hair structure is different, so they can hold on to more paint and water. But nowadays, there are more and more brands that make super high quality synthetic brushes that can do the same job. Now, there are more differences between synthetic and natural hair brushes, but this is a topic I could cover in another video. Let me know if you have any other questions in the comments down below. Here you can find other videos that will help you take your watercolor game to the next level. I really hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!